The sound of 200 elite combat operators snapping to attention hit the marble floor like a physical shockwave that left me breathless. As I strode into that grand coastal ballroom clad in my white service dress uniform, the sudden, absolute silence was heavier than any battlefield atmosphere I had ever navigated. Every person in that room stopped moving, their champagne flutes hovering in midair as the commanding officer roared an honorific that defined my life. I am Eleanor Sterling, a 58-year-old four-star admiral who had commanded, for 3 decades, in the treacherous waters of international naval warfare. While my reflection showed a decorated officer, my heart felt like the vulnerable teenager who was never good enough for her own parents. This night was meant to be a simple celebration of my sister Clara, but it quickly transformed into a collision between my secret professional identity and my family legacy. Growing up in the humid marshlands of Georgia, I was the odd child who preferred strategic manuals to social gatherings. My father, a legendary local high school football coach, viewed my fascination with maritime command as a bizarre, shameful aberration. He adored Clara, whose sweet personality and traditional life choices perfectly mirrored his own expectations, while my relentless questions and military ambitions earned me nothing but his cold, dismissive silence at the dinner table. The conflict reached a breaking point years ago when I shared my acceptance into the Naval Academy. My mother watched with concern while my father simply folded his newspaper with finality, declaring that my obsession was merely a phase I would soon outgrow. They never could reconcile the daughter they wanted with the woman I was destined to become, leading to a profound, decades-long drift that defined every strained holiday and missed milestone we shared. 3 days before Clara was to be married, my phone chimed with a message from my father that felt like a deliberate blow to my chest. He demanded I stay away, or at least hide my uniform, claiming that my successful military career was a social embarrassment he refused to tolerate. Sitting alone in my quiet residence, I felt utterly hollow, contemplating whether my choice to serve the country had cost me the only family I would ever have. I almost surrendered to his demands until a call from Silas Thorne, a battle-hardened veteran who had served under me for years, changed my perspective entirely. He reminded me that I had stood my ground for those who never thanked me, so I could not retreat now. His words resonated deeply, forcing me to recognize that I had earned my place through years of sacrifice, grit, and the weight of high-stakes command decisions. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone. "Sure," I said calmly. "Let's call him." My mother's expression shifted first. Not panic, just uncertainty. I put the call on speaker. My landlord answered on the second ring, distracted and friendly. "Hey Claire, everything okay?" "Sorry," I said. "Quick question. My dad says if I don't sign over part of the business tonight you're planning to evict me." Silence. "Then what?" The entire table went still. My father opened his mouth slightly, but said nothing. The landlord sounded genuinely confused now. "Who told you I'd evict her?" Nobody answered. Then his tone changed. Not aggressive, just suddenly careful. "Wait. Are these the same people who contacted me last month asking questions about ownership?" My stomach dropped. My mother looked away first. The cafe noise around us suddenly felt very far away. Cups steaming, grinder running, somebody laughing near the window, normal life continuing while something private finally became visible. "I told them," the landlord continued, "that the lease is solely yours, and I'm not discussing your business with anyone else." A long pause followed, then professionally and unmistakably, "And Claire, nobody is removing you from that property. If anyone keeps interfering, I'd prefer communication goes through attorneys." That was the moment everything changed, not loudly, quietly, like air leaving something inflated. My father leaned back in his chair and folded the contract without looking at me. My mother suddenly started talking about misunderstandings, intentions, concern. The words blurred together after a while because the important part had already happened. Someone outside the family had treated me like the legitimate owner without hesitation. No permission required. Eventually, they stood to leave. Neither apologized. I didn't ask them to. After closing, I wiped down tables slower than usual while rain pressed softly against the windows. One of my regulars lingered near the counter before heading out. "Your parents?" he asked gently. I looked toward the door they'd walked through earlier, then back at the quiet cafe. "Something like that," I said. And for the first time in years, the answer felt honest. My mother eventually found me by the dock, revealing that she had quietly collected every news article about my promotions, keeping them hidden away to avoid sparking my father's resentment. The weight of that admission was staggering. She had loved me in the shadows, trapped by the dynamics of a marriage in which my father's pride could not survive the reality of my achievements. It was a tragedy of timing and unspoken expectations. The final reconciliation came when my father joined us by the railing, his usual bravado completely replaced by raw honesty. He confessed that he had avoided military service during the war through his family's connections, a secret shame that had fueled his decades of bitterness toward me. He admitted that my success had forced him to confront his own cowardice, and he finally told me, with tears in his eyes, that he had always been proud. The next morning, he presented me with a box containing every letter I had written home from the academy, preserved with the care of a man who cherished what he had failed to protect. Reading the words of my 18-year-old self, I saw a girl who deserved the approval she had worked so hard to find. The realization hit me that my true victory was never the rank or the accolades, but the reclamation of my own worth. As I drove back toward the base, the morning sun illuminated the landscape in a way that felt entirely new. I had spent so much of my life waiting for permission to be proud of who I had become, yet that power had been mine all along. I no longer needed to hide my uniform or my journey, because the truth of my character was finally loud enough to silence every doubt I had ever harbored.